time for the shorter approach.
Modern jets are so aerodynamically efficient. One of the greatest challenges in flying them is getting them down and getting them to slow down. Speed brakes or flight spoilers are devices used to help increase the descent rate to help it slow down.
Captain Tafuri deploys 965 speed brakes and types in the navigation computer the letter R for Roseau, the code for the radio beacon a few miles short of the runway. But instead of flying towards the beacon, the jet makes an almost imperceptible turn to the left away from Cali. Seconds later, First Officer Williams says 3 words that cause tension in the cockpit to soar. Where are we? The flight management computer has inexplicably sent the plane in the wrong direction.
The instrument basically said, well, what you put in this box says that you need to make a turn and go back that direction. Well, that created a situational position confusion for the flight crew.
First Officer Williams has taken manual control, while the crew desperately tries to figure out where they are in the dark and what's going on with their computer.
The longer the crew talks about it, the more uncertainty there is that things are what they believe.
Out of nowhere, the ground proximity warning system blares out. The plane is at 9,000 feet, but the crew is unaware there's a towering mountain directly ahead. The first officer goes to full power and tilts the nose up so much, a stall warning erupts in the cockpit. There's mayhem in the cabin.
I just remember hearing people crying and screaming, and I was terrified.
Mercedes' mother and father helped prepare her for the worst.
Through all of that chaos, I remember hearing my mom's voice. Her voice calmed me down because she was actually praying. I was holding onto my dad's hand at the same time.
12 seconds after the warning alarm goes off, the sound of splintering trees shatters the silence on a mountainside at 8,900 feet. Trees impale the jet's hull as 17,000 pounds of fuel explode on impact.
It was just the loudest, scariest sound I'd ever heard.
The destroyed jet's wreckage spills over the top of a ridge. Tragically, if a jet had gained just 200 more feet in altitude, they would have cleared the mountain. Unconscious and seriously wounded, Mercedes Ramirez is trapped overnight in the wreckage. She finally comes to early the next morning.
I was just asking God, please give me a second chance. I mean, I just want to get off this mountain. Just please send people to save us.
Her prayers are answered when she hears a helicopter.
I remember that 2 of the other survivors were jumping up and down and waving their arms.
Mercedes is too badly injured to get up, but uses a shiny scrap of metal to alert rescuers to their location.
I told them, I said, well, I can't leave without my parents.
Mercedes doesn't know it yet, but her mother and father are among the dead. That include 149 other passengers and all 8 crew members. Mercedes, one of only 4 survivors, is in critical condition with internal injuries and a broken pelvis.
My GI tract, intestinal area, had to be operated on and rerouted to get better.
Black boxes recovered intact prove the Boeing 757 was functioning perfectly. Now investigators have to find out what caused the jet to crash 4 minutes before it was supposed to land. According to Columbia's Civil Aviation Authority, it all comes down to a simple keystroke. Flight 965's crew misprogrammed the crucial final coordinate into the flight management computer. They typed the letter R for the Roseau navigational radio beacon near Cali's airport. But the system interpreted the R keystroke as Bogota Airport's Romeo beacon, 132 miles to the east and behind the plane. The mistake reroutes Flight 965 directly into a 9,000-foot mountain called El Diluvio.
Had they typed in ROZO, that waypoint would have come up, but they didn't know that, and that was one of the lessons learned coming out of this accident.
Columbia's Civil Aviation Authority releases its final report in September 1996 and finds probable cause was primarily pilot error. The flight crew didn't adequately plan and execute their approach and lacked situational awareness. And they didn't revert to basic radio navigation when computer navigation became confusing in a critical phase of the flight. Colombian investigators also cite the crew's failure to retract the speed brakes, which prevented Flight 965 from gaining enough altitude during its escape maneuver.
Out of this accident came a design change that if you called for maximum power for CFIT escape type maneuver, that if the speed brakes were deployed, that they would automatically retract.
American Airlines agrees pilot error led to the crash, but is disappointed investigators did not also fault flight management computers and the lack of a radar approach. The NTSB releases its own recommendations a month later. That the FAA develop a mandatory controlled flight into terrain training program using realistic simulators to better train pilots to fly into mountainous areas. And that the FAA examine the effectiveness of enhanced ground proximity warning equipment to provide pilots with an earlier warning than the 12 seconds they had on Flight 965.
The Kali accident was one of the true industry game changers. After this accident, the recognition of the critical need for predictive technology revolutionized aviation safety, and the control flight into terrain accident type went down dramatically.
Out of all the planes that were in the sky that day, why our plane? Why us?
Mercedes Ramirez still struggles to make sense of a world without the two cherished people she lost that night.
I would do anything to turn back time and just be able to hug them and tell them how much I love them.
Mercedes was driven to share the lessons she learned from her brush with death, and today she travels the world as a motivational speaker.
It's about realizing that every day you have a brand new second chance at life, at work, at your career, and with your family.
January 20th, 1992, 6:20 p.m. Air Interflight 5148 roars down runway 36 and takes off from Lyon, France on a short commuter flight to Strasbourg. 90 passengers are on board, most of them business travelers, and 6 crew members. Graduate student Nicholas Skurius is in the last row of seats.
I was visiting my girlfriend who was living in Strasbourg.
Captain Christian Heke and First Officer Joel Sharabin are in the cockpit of the revolutionary Airbus A320, the world's first commercial airliner to have completely computerized controls. Its bold advertisements declare a superior intelligence has arrived.
It's similar to what you have on your home computer when you're trying to fly a flight simulator with the joystick. It's all computer controlled. You're never physically moving the flight control.
Air Inter was a regional sort of airline, so this was a bit of an upstart carrier, but they were a highly motivated group that wanted the airline to succeed.
Part of that success depends on competing with France's high-speed train system, putting pressure on the crew for an on-time arrival.
You got to get it on the ground, in the gate, offloaded, loaded, turned, back in the air, and you're racing the clock.
Flight 5148 is routine until air traffic control tells the crew they'll have to land on a different runway. Because of a change in wind direction, the active runway is now runway 5.
When there are last-minute changes, such as runway changes or route changes, pilots don't like that because they've already programmed the computer to fly a particular route to get to the airport.
Complicating things even more, air traffic control recommends a non-precision approach, a type of manual landing the pilot has had very little experience flying in this brand new computerized jet.
Non-precision approaches do not have the electronic vertical guidance. And in this case, that was part of the issue. The descents require a lot of pre-planning using a procedure that they don't use a lot.
Air traffic control doesn't know it, but the pilot wants to stick with his initial flight plan and make a precision approach to the original runway. Then, once flight computers have gotten the Airbus into position, he'll go manual and circle to land at the new runway, runway 5. Flight 5148 begins its descent. They plan to land in 15 minutes. But there is growing tension and a growing problem in the cockpit. Captain Hickey is getting behind his breakthrough jet.
Getting behind the airplane is a widely used statement to say that the pilot's thinking of what's going on is behind where the airplane actually is.
At 7:13, Captain Hickey finds out he'll have to switch to manual even earlier. Otherwise, he'll have to wait for 3 other jets scheduled to take off from the same runway.
If you're going to fly that kind of approach and you've never done it before, that in and of itself can become a distraction.
With zero visibility in the fog, pilots are having trouble keeping track of the Airbus's horizontal position. The plane ends up almost a mile left of where they should be on approach to runway 5. At 7:19, landing gear is down and locked. But the Airbus is descending way too fast at 3,300 feet a minute. Passengers are completely unaware of the serious problems in the cockpit.
I didn't notice something strange. It was a quiet, normal flight.
Just as passengers are asked to make sure their seatbelts are fastened, a low-altitude sensor rings out in the cockpit. 200. A second later, a monstrous crash into a mountaintop. The world's most intelligent airplane is on descent from Lyon to Strasbourg, France.
It was one of the most technologically advanced airplanes in the world, particularly in its early days.
It's a raw, foggy night, January 22nd, 1992. A wind shift causes a runway change that complicates Flight 5148's approach.
It's a high demand requirement to change a runway for pilots when they're in close to the airport.
Captain Christian Hickey turns on the plane's wing de-icers and makes a left turn onto final approach. But he's having trouble. There's zero visibility, and they're almost a mile out of position to the left of the runway. They're descending way too fast at 3,300 feet a minute. Then, out of nowhere, a low-altitude warning. 200. 1 second later, the Airbus slams into Mount Saint-Odile.
The noise of the disintegration of the airplane was so huge that I didn't hear anything else.
The nose section disintegrates when 1,200 gallons of jet fuel ignite. The plane's undercarriage tears off as it plows through the woods.
You are going right, left, hurting your head in the front of the seat.
The last 7 rows, including Nicholas Scurious' seat, shear off from what's left of the plane.
I realized that the airplane was completely disintegrated. I was completely terrified.
Scurious escapes out into the snow, but he hears another survivor trapped in the wreckage, a panicked mother trying to save her baby girl.
The mother was not able to move, so I have to take the baby.
The mother and daughter and 7 other passengers survive more than 4 hours on the snowy mountain waiting for rescuers to arrive. The horrific crash claims 87 lives, including both pilots and 3 crew members. In November 1993, France's Ministry of Transport and Tourism releases its official report. Investigators cite a chain of causes. First, the crew was late in modifying their approach strategy and did not properly configure the plane for landing.
The sequence of events in this particular accident was in a very compressed time scale. They can't process or assimilate the information fast enough to identify it, understand it, correct it, and execute.
But the fundamental cause cited by investigators is the pilot's failure to correct the abnormally high rate of descent of 3,300 feet per minute. Investigators say the error occurred because of confusion about a crucial knob that controls both vertical speed and flight path angle.
They mistakenly believed that they were setting up a 3.3 degree descent profile, but with the mode selection they had made, they set up a 3,300 foot per minute rate of descent, which the airplane struggled to make.
The ergonomic design was poor. It should have either been a button that identified what mode you were in, or it should have been two separate panels.
Other causes cited in the investigation: below average crew interaction and poor communication, and the absence of a ground proximity warning system which deprived the crew of one final warning opportunity.
Given that this was a short-haul, fast operation, they were going to get a lot of nuisance warnings, and they didn't want that presented to the flight crews all the time.
Air Inter defended its lack of a ground proximity warning system, saying it would not have prevented the crash. By the end of the year, Europe's joint aviation authorities require all air transport aircraft to be equipped with a ground proximity warning system. Airbus modified the A320's flight control unit so that a vertical speed setting would be displayed as a 4-digit number, preventing confusion with the unit's flight path angle mode. Air Inter also increased pilot training for the A320.
After the Monsanto deal, you can't compose a crew with 2 persons with less than 300 hours of flight on Airbus A320.
Je suis désolé. I am heartbroken.
The sadness endures for Hubert Degollier, who lost his son Hugh Degollier, a flight attendant, in the crash. He still can't accept the moment that took down Flight 5148, the turn of a knob that began their lethal loss of altitude.
Ils ont eu 17 secondes.
They had 17 seconds to realize that they were in a bad descent.
Et ils sont pas
They weren't aware. Why? Because they put their trust in the
à
automation.
l'automatisme.
In the aviation community, weighing the benefits and risks posed by automation is an ongoing debate.
Manual handling skills are critical, and the appropriate use of automation balanced in keeping manual flying skills is one of the current and future industry challenges that we have, and we're struggling with it.
Painful memories of the Mount St. Odile crash are now etched in stone. But Nicholas Skouras will always give thanks for being one of the few survivors that snowy night.
You quickly realize that you are not invincible and you are human. So, life goes on.